known for several years, and other sponsors of this seminar for considering me as a person who can and who should make a presentation here discussing on a very important issue: religion, society, progress, and peace. I have to make a confession to begin with. I am not a religious person. I have no religion. I have no God. I'm a modernist. I haven't even as yet graduated to postmodernism. So I'm stuck in modernity. So I'm going to look at the topic given to me, religion and peace, essentially from the perspective of political history and political theory. Talking about religion and peace in today's context is a very difficult proposition, because the moment you talk about religion and peace, all the violence that is going on all around the world, particularly from 2001, in the name of war for controlling terrorism or the global war on terror, and the escalation of religious violence from, in fact, the end of the Cold War, the resurgence of religion in politics has brought us to a point, and people like me, to think very seriously about what is the role of religion in society today. The importance of religion at a personal level, as I said, I'm not a religious person. I can understand and I respect that people have faith. But then religion is essentially a faith-based system. It believes in God. It believes in the creation of this world by a supreme deity, and the rules, whether it's the canonical law or the Manu's law or the Torahs or what have we, are laws given by the God or those who interpret the God. And these cannot be challenged. There is no possibility of challenging the God's word within the body of a religion. So, as a modernist and as a democrat, where we believe, and as we have seen the world move through the period of enlightenment, as we call it, more than 300 years from 17th century, the movement was to move away from the control of religion and religious preachers over society, over property, over life, over human relations, on the basis of laws given by a God over which the human person has no control, no right to question. So basically what Kancha was referring to is an unequal society, because there is God and there are the fallen people, and the fallen people have to be redeemed through the practice of religion. The movement of the Enlightenment period gradually changed I don't need to go into all the histories, you are all aware of that, how religion had to be separated from the temporal. So the old saying of give unto Caesar what belongs to the Caesar and give unto God what belongs to God became in fact a reality in the course of the movement of history, with the growth of modernity, with the growth of capitalism, with the growth of sciences, and the arrival of a modern constitutional state. The most influential event in world history for me was the French Revolution, which established the equality of all human persons. All men are born equal, created as equal. Men is the word that they use. I would prefer to say human persons, humanity. But that's the principle, the fundamental principle of democracy, as we have come to recognize and live in the world today, is equality. And the establishment of rationality and reason as the prime engine for finding truth, for making life more meaningful, moving towards progress. The impetus, as we all know, came from science. The transformation of the agrarian society into an industrial society also gradually reduced the importance of God in our productive system, because we came to discover machines, sciences, ways of controlling nature, moving away from total dependence on God, whether He will give us rain or not give us rain, and so on and so forth. We move towards being able to control our lives, our productive systems, a generation of wealth, and humanity's progress began. And as it began, we saw the importance of religion reduce in society. But the question, let me come back to now. What we are facing today is a great challenge to the theory and understanding of secularism. Neera talked about the difference between secularism and secularization. Secularization is what happened over a 300-year period, where the secularist movement, there was no secularist movement as such, but gradual differentiation or moving away from religion to other systems and reducing the importance of religion in society and politics was the essential step which released the humanity from a geocentric worldview to an anthropocentric worldview. And it is the anthropocentric worldview which changed the world. But what's happening today is the resurgence of religion in politics, where the theory and the understanding that secularism is based on separation of religion and politics, and secularism is fundamentally based on the value of equality of all people, and it is essential for modernity. And secularism and religion and modernity are not compatible. This has been our understanding for a long time. But currently, many theoreticians, political theorists, are now talking about that religion and modernity are not incompatible. One of them is Mr. Casanova, who has been written extensively on this. But the secularists, on the other hand, claim that it is the crisis of modernity that is actually sending people back to religion, and it is not the failure of secularism or secularization. Modernity is definitely in crisis, and there is a link, or what I would say is the growth, if you look at the growth of human thinking, from moving away from religion to equality to democracy, and the dream that one day humanity will live in a world free of exploitation and everybody will have enough to eat. There will be no hunger, there will be no deprivation, there will be no ill health, has been completely shattered. It was also a secular dream, and it was also a part of the secularist thinking, the body of political thought known as socialism, which we have now rejected. But with the rejection of socialist ideals and values, what has happened? What has happened is loss of faith in human destiny, in the secularist process. During the Cold War period, with all their faults, there was the socialist bloc. And the socialist bloc kept the dream of a world free of exploitation alive. The response to the socialist bloc, if you look at the political system of the Cold War period of capitalism, capitalist world, was a regulationist state. The capitalist world, in fact the United States, was the leader of the regulationist state system in the capitalist world, where all other capitalist countries accepted the leadership of the United States. The regulationist system was a response to the fear of a working class revolution, of a challenge to capitalist system of society. But with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the disappearance of the socialist bloc, and with the demise of the socialist movement in the world today, there is no vision of a society without exploitation. If you look around the world today, whether in the United States or in my country or in Europe, the number of people who are dissatisfied, the number of people who are challenging, the number of people who are looking for something different is on the rise. From the Occupy in New York to the Tahrir Square or the Arab Spring, or anywhere we see, there is a growing body of dissatisfied people who are questioning why the world is trapped in a system where poverty is increasing every day, despite the fact that everybody claims the economy is growing. Growth, the story of growth, is the most important story that we get in the newspapers. Every day I open the newspaper, there is one front page story of whether we are going to achieve 7.3% growth or 7.1% growth. But there is no information, there is no talk, there is no discussion about why poverty is growing in this country, why income inequality has grown exponentially despite the promise of neoliberalism that trickle down of wealth will bring prosperity and difference of classes will be obliterated and we will live, in a much better world. The fact is, the neoliberal system, the globalization process, has increased poverty globally. It is this situation where it's quite clear that people are turning towards religion, towards obscurantism, towards strong man. Like we have in this country Mr. Modi, a strong man. We believe he will deliver us from this morass of poverty, and people voted for him. They are voting for the right wing all over the world, including Mr. Trump. It's nothing very new. The last point that I want to make, we've seen this happen. People search for a strong person in Europe in the 30s, during the days of great economic crisis. A similar thing has happened again and again. The last point that I want to make is that there is a nexus between religion and capitalism. The capitalism needs an enemy. With the demise of socialism, the enemy that capitalism has found today is religious fundamentalism, particularly of the Islamic variety. And why I say this, and those of you who are aware, if you look at what's happening in West Asia, if you look at the 70s and 80s in the Arab world, the Arab world was moving away from religion to pan-Arabism, to Arab nationalism, to Arab socialism. And if you look at how the Western world reacted to and manipulated and influenced these states and the growing politics of secular nationalism and socialism in the Arab world is where we find the answers to why the alliance between Islamic fundamentalism and American imperialism became a fact of life in the 80s. In Pakistan, our neighbor country, the bringing in of, during the Afghan war, the creation of the Taliban, bringing in of Zia-ul Haq. Before Zia-ul Haq, Pakistan's politics was not as radically Islamist as it is post Zia-ul Haq and post the intervention of Carter, of Reagan administration in Afghanistan, pumping in billions of dollars unaccounted, creating this force which is now the scourge of South Asia and the world. This is the alliance. Saudi Arabia and the United States, and Saudi Arabia is the fountainhead of Islamic fundamentalism. The relation between capitalism and religion is very old. I need not go into it, whether it came during the Calvinist period or what Max Weber has written and others. We all know that. Property, right to property is a part of religion. I remember as a student of political science having read Rousseau, where he said the first man who put a fence around a piece of land created the civil society. He created property. Yeah, right. And so I just want to conclude. It is not that I'm not saying religion has had no role in bringing peace, in bringing solace to suffering people. But religion's claim has always been to take the individual towards his God and creating peace within himself, as I have understood whatever I have read of religion. Religion's capacity to change an exploitative system, we have seen also, not religion as such, but there have been movements in India, everywhere else, whether even Protestantism, which came up against the oppressive system of Catholic rule, at different points of time. But these are the spirits of human challenge, And in those days, religion or religious thinkers had the capacity to be able to throw up the challenge, bring people together. Whether it was the Sufis who came to India, in fact were at loggerheads with the Muslim rulers. Sufis took up the cause of the poor peasantry, the Bhakti movement, many. So I'm not saying religion has, but religion's social role to mitigate, to step in, to prevent the conflicts. As I look around in the history and as I look around my world where I live in, my fear, religion's capacity to bring peace is no longer that powerful. Thank you very much.
May I now invite John Dayal, writer, researcher, activist on human rights and on freedom of speech.
But not yet a cynic. Thank you for not only inviting me but having me in Nalsa. Thank you for having me in Hyderabad, where a secretariat of the government is being built on principles of an ancient science of Vastu, written in the language that Kacha is not allowed to learn. And its twin, Siamese twin, partitioned but recently, is building a new capital based on the same principles and an imagined ceremony of those times, as much as MGM would imagine an Old Testament or the Bible story. This is not that I am saying that India has a default religion. And certainly the default religion is not Hinduism, is not Christianity, is not Sikhism, is not Jainism, is not the ancient Buddhism. I can't name it because the Supreme Court can't name it. The Constitution names it only when it sets up commissions for minorities and has to name some as religions, even if the Sardar Sahib said Sikhism is not a religion. Alas, Parliament says it is. Very confusing, and therefore for people like me, even more confusing. I wrote that little introduction, she said, but my basic training as a professional is as a reporter of conflict. I am a war correspondent and a correspondent of internal wars. At one stage, I was the only Indian who was reporting the war in the Mideast. The only brown man, as a matter of fact, the only Asian, because even Japan TV wasn't there. It was only AP and AFP and Reuters. And in the early years of my profession, which were from 69 onwards, 1969 that is, must have covered more than 200 mini domestic wars, many of them one-sided between Hindus and Muslims. So forgive me when I was sniggering in row number 2, when people talk of peace and context are conflated with religion. Books don't fight in my library. The Bible in several languages and the Quran, the Taj edition in English and the original in Arabic sit quite comfortably together with a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. They never fight. But I haven't yet met a religion which has not created widows. I haven't ever met. I have seen Christians fight in Lebanon and kill. I've seen Jews bomb little children. Not as Jews, as soldiers of Israel. The peaceful Buddhists, and the Dalai Lama is a personal friend, and if you go on Facebook, you will see him taking his selfie with me. I have seen Buddhists kill with a viciousness I've not seen in Beirut. I've also reported the aftermaths of what? In Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Laos, in countries of the East. No, sir. Practitioners of religion are not peaceful. But I am not a critic of religion as much as I am not a triumphalist saying peace of Christ. And as Christ said, I give you peace. My peace I leave with you in perpetuity. It's very difficult for me. More so because for half my life, like two of my friends here, I was not a practitioner of religion. I was an atheist. So I've converted from being a born person in a Christian family to a non-believer to a convertee again. And when I was converting the second time, the first was the Amblikas, I chose a faith and I would not choose a second best. So technically, I think the one I practice is the best in the world. But we will leave that also. So why does it all become important? Kancha so brutally, so violently, so painfully narrated the ground situation. We are a secular country. We are possibly, but not at all, a secularized country. I wish we were, but then we would have a level field for discussion of what we want to discuss. This is a country where religion is practiced, I just told you, but for others it is seen as a service provider. As Christians you're good because you run 54,000 schools, colleges and hospitals. 54,000 is an extremely large number in a country in such short supply of education and medical relief for this country, a country without social net. You're seen as a service provider. But the moment, and I told you of the visa crisis, India has the most obscene visa thesis in the world. But because they see religion only as a service provider, when they see religion as an empowerment agency, as a succor to the soul, as an empowerment of the body, as a recognition of Mr. Shepherd, is it? Mr. Shepherd, as a word, it is difficult. But it is imperative that this terrible thing called religion and this terrible thing called secular government be harnessed in the pursuit of peace. I told you, I've seen horrors of peace, of war. I am possibly more than the Mahatma who never really saw war. I've seen war, covered it. I'm a votary of peace. How do you then bring about this massive force and this immovable object together? We would need peace within religions. How can a Christianity which practices this heinous thing called caste as much as the Hindus and the Sikhs too, and nobody believes, please, that Sikhism has no caste, the Guru Granth doesn't. Punjab does. And they carry it with them to California and to London. Peace within would require the standard procedure, standard operating procedure, reconciliation and understanding, a giving up of your superiority, coming down, bringing the other up, meeting at midway, not pulling him up, not stooping down, speaking, then negotiating when you're negotiating. And now I'm negotiating with time. Negotiating peace with others requires that you be recognized as an entity. How can peace be negotiated between two forces which are invisible, which are ambiguous, which are quantum, present at two places at the same time? Unity. Then you negotiate on what? The Constitution of India. All of us swear by it, and we have to swear by judges. Half of the judgments are against us. Half of the judgments in time have reduced religious freedom by more than a half. But now, the nuclear bomb has a religion. In serious literature, in popular literature, in the social media, there is an Islamic bomb. And if you were to do .pk, which is Pakistan, you will discover that there is a Hindu bomb. Bombs kill, atom bombs kill a lot. The war, Second World War, ended with 2 nuclear bombs because Truman and others thought that the cost of peace in the Pacific, in the Okinawa, could not be sustained. We could not suffer those losses. So, to cut short larger losses, they unleashed this horrendous atomic bomb. This bomb now exists, 270 of them in Pakistan, 220 or so in India, an unknown number in China and Korea and elsewhere in the world. I would not like to name it. If we don't talk peace, where will my grandson Kabir live? He's half Hindu, half Catholic, half Bengali, half Malayali. His first cousin is half Muslim. Where will they live? I pose this question to you all I always end most of my interventions with this question: where will Kabir live? Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. May I invite Professor, Faculty of Law, Osmania University.
Respected Chairperson, learned speakers on the panel, and my dear participants and the students of Nalsar. I am thankful to my friend Professor Mustafa Saab for inviting me, giving the opportunity, but I am more thankful to him for drafting me in this morning session, because in morning a man is supposed to be more intelligent than in the evening, so we'll try that how best we can within 10 minutes conclude a matter, issue which requires ocean to talk. Ocean is there to talk. But keeping with that, only few things bringing about the link, nexus between the religion and the theme of our conference this evening. Now, here we can talk about the religion in various manner we have seen for the last 2 days. But what is basically the element, essential ingredients of the religion: peace, justice, equality, or development, sustained development, are there. And is there any nexus between these concept of religion? I have to go back to this history of the definition. This definition of religion or definition of peace, etc., may be a repetition for the senior participants here, but as you know, the young students are also here. So for this, maybe a little information. As far as the religion, concept of religion is concerned, what exactly the religion we are talking about? S.B. Taylor has defined that religion is a spiritual being, a belief in the spiritual being. But Fraser further went and they said this is not the complete definition of religion, because only holding a belief that there is super being will have no purpose unless there is some more effect or relationship between the man and the God or the supreme being. Then he said, this further goes that these concepts of super being, which was according to various religions we are having, and we don't know who is right, but what the concept is there of the God or the super being, he is concerned, he is able to control the natural process, the nature course, as well as the conduct of the human being. Because when these two forces are working, and we believe that yes, we are answerable to God because we are created by our Creator, and this essence and sense of accountability is very important, as you know in this present day and also. If we are conscious that we are answerable, we are accountable, it definitely changes our conduct. Now this belief linked with the presence of the God, that He knows everything, He is watching us, or we are to answerable because we are accountable, and then whatever the do and don'ts or the dogmas or injunctions are given, we have to follow. Now this belief, if you believe in any religion, I'm not talking about one religion, in my entire talk it will be all religion, because this is the basis of that religion, that we are being seen, we are being observed, we are being, our acts are being recorded, and one day or other we are answerable. This sense of belief, this appreciation itself is sufficient to regulate the conduct of a human being, and there is no necessity of any CCTV. But who is controlling having it? And if at all one believes that yes, you are being answered and we have to go back, then how the peace will come, or how the peace is related to that? The concept of peace also, it is not only the mere absence of dispute or mere absence of war, but it is something positive which goes in bringing about the relationship between man and God and between man and man. When he talks about relationship between man and man, necessarily the concept of peace had to come into existence, and in various religions they refer that it is a state of amity. Peace is state of amity is there, which is created or it can be obtained by the concept of religion. Now with respect to the peace, we also pass a number of legislation, number of constitution, number of theories, but that has been done only after suffering. For example, various great wars, then they are stuck together, this international is necessary to regulate the action of various countries, because we have already lost so many things, and then you have to see that in the future we are not suffering that. Now the purpose is that if you are controlling your own deeds and you want to create an amity or peace, then you have to have a talk of dialogue, a force in the form of religion, in the form of legislation. But this is already there in the form of religious dogmas which have been given there. Now, in case of justice also, it is only conducting our administration of justice, that equity and justice we are doing for the purpose of maintaining peace, because peace is related to the justice and justice is related to the concept of equality. Now, every religion has talk about peace. You find number of quotations in various religious books. Same is the case with the conduct of the human being. Now, if we go all these quotations given in the religious books, they will talking about peace, distance, sustainability, and there are only 2 or 3 I will refer as an example. For example, in one case, one religion mentions that we have created the entire universe. But creating the universe, creating the earth and creating the sky was a more greater job than creating a human being. But we have made all this universe subject to you, because it is to provide all this sustenance of on the existence of life on the earth. Therefore, it is meant for you. But you are cautioned that should not use in abundance and misuse it. And then God says, we have got the sufficient treasures of all these sources with us, but we will give only in the measured up amount at the appointed time. God himself will not give all these things with you. He is also sustaining all these things so that you can go through to the what called as sustainable development. So what I am trying to say here is that religion all are having the same teachings which are there from last several thousands years, but how that we have come to realize now, we are having similar constitution for origin or other human efforts to obtain peace. But here, we have suffered and then learned, but if we are believing in religion and following it, we could have got it without suffering. This is the only difference between following the religion and not following the religion. But efforts of the man will naturally be concluded, will be limited something, and as far as God is concerned, it is omnipresent, and then he can have all sorts of things. I only refer to what this common thing which is going on between religion and what is right and what is wrong. What is right and what is wrong, which religion is right, which religion is wrong, whatever deed is right, which deed is wrong. The concept as a thing, a concept, a work or a deed will be right if its consequences are right. If the consequences of a deed are wrong, bad, then it is not a good thing, it is a bad thing. Then you have further go that what is right and what is wrong is not only by the act or result of the consequences, but we have to also accept that what is right and what is wrong has to be judged on the basis of wisdom. Where from the wisdom will come? No, wisdom, all wisdom is there in religions also, various religions, all religions. So man can acquire wisdom from the religion and use that wisdom in uplifting and preserving our life and making all positive things. The basic concept of wisdom is the common factor in all the religions. It is the common factor in maintaining peace, prosperity, and sustained development. And we have to somehow or the other agree that we cannot run away from the religion. There was a time when talking about religion appearing to be a very old concept, it's outdated thing we are talking about, and we gone very far away from the religions. But once again we are coming back to think over that can the religion of any type, whatever having this basic concept as a theme of the conference, is there, that will definitely bring some benefit and maintaining peace in our lives here. So if everybody, I think it concludes that every person, whatever the religion is following it honestly, then probably there will be no problem on the earth. But that is appeared to be only a myth than reality. Thank you.
Thank you. This must be the effect of having a seminar in a law university, that everybody is so disciplined. I mean, I've never come across anyone who's in this 1.5 days, 2 days, who has exceeded that time.
Because of you and see.
No, it's because of the majesty of the law. It's not because of us. I mean, actually everyone been very, very disciplined. So may I now call upon, actually never had to say, all right, that's it, stop. People just stop. Right, John Tharakan, director of Utah Wellsprings Don Bosco Psychosocial. Intriguing.
Yeah. My effort is not to understand what we are talking or to understand what we are talking about on the theme and not how to go about it. And so my invitation is to understand not what the SDGs are about, not what religion can do, rather what is religion, peace, development, sustainability, and so on. When we were coming, we looked at a book by Eric Fromm. The title is To Have or To Be. And for me, the role of religion is to be than to do. Now let us look at some of the concepts that come in the title. Who are the disadvantaged? An obvious question, and I get into trouble for speaking about the obvious. My definition would be, or my group, we do participatory action research. The disadvantaged are people who are yet to use their capabilities at an optimal level and feel they are equal. So they are not using their capabilities at an optimal level, they are not feeling equal. They are discriminated against for various reasons. And we need to ask ourselves, are we disadvantaged or are we advantaged? I don't know what stand you people are taking. And if we feel we are disadvantaged, I find that I am disadvantaged, I would like to express my solidarity with the disadvantaged as a person who is disadvantaged. Maybe advantaged in certain ways. There I need to be careful. It is difficult to have that solidarity. So how to go about it? So first thing would be to learn from the other disadvantaged. We take for granted that we know it all and therefore we are going to do these SDGs. But are we ready to learn from our mistakes? Probably the best research tool we can have. From children, we had discussion on the JJ Act that looks at children more as criminals and they have not been consulted as what the law about them should be. Similarly, can we learn from the other disadvantaged? Talking of children, we have Alice Miller, whom is quoted also by Philip Lichtenberg. If there is no violence at home, there will be no war. You want peace? It should begin in the home. It should begin with the way we deal with children. Children are citizens in need of care and protection. Children are not potential criminals. I hope the document on the JJ rules are still with Nalsar. You have a chance still to change it. Let us begin by recognizing that the SDGs belong to the disadvantaged people. It's not to us it belongs to the people. Let us listen to them as to how they wish to have their development. The disadvantaged need to own the process, the goals. They need conscientization. We too need. In the US, I don't know if that word conscientization is allowed. Anyway, here it's allowed, or here it is, I don't know if it is tolerated even here today. It's a term of the 70s. We live in a dominator model of society. We need to understand that, which fails to respect the rights of people, makes people disadvantaged, and discounts participation. Earlier they were speaking of Rousseau, what he considers original sin. I consider domination, the tendency to dominate, as original sin. What is sustainable development? An ongoing process that involves transformation initiated, managed and shared by the disadvantaged people. not we go and dole it out to them. It is geared towards utilizing their capabilities. It's there at the maximum level, and people feel worthy of themselves as equal. Here, there was again reference to this. Ideology shifts from growth, you can calculate the percentage of growth, etc., to participatory development, where people develop participatory skills, enhance their capacity, initiate appropriate measures. Equality is acquired through their own active agency and participation. What about peace? There is true peace only when people feel equal. Peace is the outcome of sustainable development. Where there is peace, there will be no abuse of power. Peace is possible only with justice. The realization of the sustainable development goals is the highway to peace. Of course, if it is with the participation of people. What about religion? I had removed this from my statement, but I feel I could still say it and feel safe here. I think God has not founded any religion. There are so many, but He allowed us to found as many as possible. And another expression used here, religion is constructed. I wish I could contribute to the construction of religion and its meaning today. Religious experience finds expression in a community's cult, code and creed. We know about that. There is personal religion. And religion has got a tremendous ethical tradition. The golden rule is in every religion. Not to do to another what you would not want them to do to you, or in the positive sense. With institutionalization, of religion come leadership and authority structures, exercise of power, and of course its abuse. If power is abused, there is power struggle and conflicts in the name of God or religious affiliation. Religion has the capacity to address humanity holistically. It has the potential to promote the SDGs. Genuine religion looks at the equality of all human beings. Let us look at some of the aspects of the role of religion. Religion teaches that we serve without expecting fruits. If we expect fruit, we will want to own the SDGs. But the people own. Nishkama karma, not Nishkarma karma, sorry. Religion teaches us to be servants of people. And the other one would be next. Religion teaches equality. And therefore, what is expected is that we step down to equality, not go up. It's a call to invert the present pyramidal social structure. The change agents need to step down constantly. I had a happy experience when I came in. I was introduced, welcomed by Professor Faizan, the Vice Chancellor. Till I came here, I was in contact with Mr. Chidambaram. So I asked about his PA, where is he? He said, don't worry, he is somewhere. And afterwards I was happy to see who he is. He is a person who is constantly stepping down to equality. We are invited to step back and step down to equality. Religion teaches sound ethics. Religion teaches a human rights approach. Religion teaches justice and peace. Are you as fast? Participation. Accepting the participatory approach is like letting go of all that we thought we could make us succeed. It is indeed a monkey's choice. That's why the monkey is all around. You must have been wondering. Is holding on to the nuts or the banana or to power. Without enabling the agency of the disadvantaged, there can be no sustainable development. In conclusion, next. All people of goodwill have a unique opportunity to realize practical religion, authentic spirituality, sound ethics in the pursuit of SDGs by joining hands with the disadvantaged and living a spirituality of participation that excludes every trace of domination and establishes a just society where peace flows like a river. Next. What we need to let go of, we are talking about the monkey is on top now, that we know what is best for the disadvantaged. Let go of not trusting the capabilities of the disadvantaged. Let go of the functioning in the dominator model of society, wanting to go higher. The alternative, peace that comes from the experience of equality. And the final slide. The role of religion is very simple. To be rather than to do. To listen to the children. And if we are able to listen to the children, we can listen also to the other disadvantaged. To be what it teaches and to teach what it practices. Not to say a word extra. If you don't practice, don't teach. Shortcut to all this, participation with the disadvantaged. Thank you.
Thank you. May I now invite BK Anjali Ben from Shanti Sarovar, Hyderabad, to make a presentation. 10 minutes. Thank you.